From Naples, Florida, this is the One Extraordinary Marriage Show, where being busy is overdone, romancing is fun, and scheduling sex is taking the guesswork out of wondering when you're going to get some. I'm Tony DeLorenzo, your co-host, along with my beautiful wife, Elisa. From coast to coast and around the world, thank you for joining us. It's time to talk sex, love, and commitment. Give us a call or text us on the HUG hotline at 858-876-5663 or send us an email to hugs@oneextraordinarymarriage.com. In today's episode, we're sharing our cross-country moving adventures and the crazy things that happened along the way.
And there's an anonymous quote that talks about moving that says, moving to a new place is not just about changing your address. It's about starting a new chapter in your life. Mm-hmm. And that has very much been true for us, and we're going to be talking about it in today's episode. But first, we start every episode with a hug, and a hug is really an opportunity for Tony and I to celebrate and recognize what each of you are doing in your marriage, in your communities, and how you're making a difference for marriages. And this hug comes from a comment that was in the Facebook group regarding leading a 6 Pillars of Intimacy small group. And this wife says, we have been blessed to lead a 6 Pillars of Intimacy small group 4 different times. And each time as we poured in, we received so much more. We used the book and the workbook, and if possible, had the couples get their own workbook so the answers could be unbiased. We had kept our groups small so that it helped to form an intimate setting. We shared a weekly podcast from Tony and Elisa that coincided with the intimacy being worked on. She goes on to say that they broke the group into 10 weeks. And what I love about that is when each of you are leading a small group, you get to decide what that structure, how that format is going to look like. Going on, for the chapter on spiritual intimacy, we broke the group off as couples and privately so that we could have them pray over their spouse and ended sharing communion as a group. We started the group by asking each person to introduce their spouse and be as descriptive as possible, given the amount of years married and what they individually hope to attain and develop from the group. Lastly, this takes a lot of effort, and we learned that as much as we were pouring into others, we must not neglect us. Be mindful to check in on each other, as fulfilling as this will be, and don't allow it to be a drain on you. God's blessings over you.
Oh, I love it. And this is a season for small groups starting up again. And we've heard about so many of you starting small groups in the One Family private Facebook group. Thank you for posting. If you are starting a group or would like to start a group, get in there, post it, tell people where you're at, where you're from, and let them and invite them in. Because these are others in the One Family that you could bless, who could be blessed, and may even know others. And you guys can hang out and get to know one another, those of you who are leading. Something special may be coming up here in August. Elisa and I are talking about doing something with the leaders of small groups. So get into the One Family Facebook group, because that's where we'll be posting that.
Absolutely. And, as Tony said at the top of this episode, we did have some cross-country adventures.
We did.
And, as we were posting pictures, Tony's so good about posting pictures. As we were posting pictures along the way, a lot of you had different questions about what we were doing and why and when and all of the hows and what fors and all of that kind of stuff. And so we're going to actually take a little time in this episode to talk about it. But I thought it was interesting because I did a little research on moving prior to this particular episode. And according to NASDAQ.com, between the ages of 18 and 45, the average American will move 5 or 6 times. Once you reach the age of 45, you're likely to only move 2 or 3 more times. And even going deeper into this particular article, it said over the course of a lifetime, the average person moves approximately 11 times.
Right. Because obviously there's moves that happen between the time you're born to 17. And so there are other times in your life when you possibly have moved.
And are we going to link to this article?
We are.
Okay. I would actually encourage each and every one of you, because there was this really great little storied outline in there about how people move and when people move. And it was really fascinating because, it even talks about the fact that the most common reasons to move are a new job, a change in family size, moving to a better neighborhood. And truth be told, over the years, these have all been reasons for us to move. But this move from California to Florida was a little bit different.
Yes.
It goes back. Actually, Tony got a vision about 10 years ago that we would create One Extraordinary Marriage to be something that would be location independent, that we didn't have to stay in California, that we would have the flexibility. Initially, I think the vision, and you correct me if I'm wrong, initially the vision was that we would be able to travel.
Yeah, and let me just put this into context. 10 years ago, I was still running my other business, my paintless dent repair business. And so that was very much location dependent. We had to be in San Diego because that's where I had built my business, in that location. And so when I got this vision 10 years ago, 6 years prior to me even selling that business, it was like, no way. Like, there's no way, God, that this is going to happen, but I see it and I'm going to believe it, and we're going to pray about it and we're going to press in for it. So I just want to put that in context, because I think a lot of times we have these visions, these dreams, even about ourselves and our marriage, and we think it's going to happen overnight, and we want it to happen overnight. And this one in particular has taken us 10 years to see the actual fruition, because we are literally standing in our new home in Naples, Florida, as we speak. Luckily for us, we did rent a fully furnished place because our stuff still hasn't shown up from our movers. But it's such a surreal experience to share this in a way where it's like, wow, these dreams and these visions and the prayers, it didn't happen overnight. It may sound like it to some of you who are just maybe popping in, but this is something that we have looked at and talked about and discussed for 10 years.
And truth be told, this last year, as we've seen so many of you, as we've been traveling to different places, doing, marriage getaway, we've been to Charlotte, we've been to Chicago, we were even here in Florida. We kept asking God, like every time we'd go to a place, we're like, okay, is this it? Is this the next home? Is this where we're supposed to go? Where are we supposed to? And there were a number of different things. A lot of people are like, well, why Florida? Because there were a number of different things that we wanted.
Yeah, and in those places that we were speaking, we were bringing the 6 Pillars of Intimacy masterclass to many churches, and we were doing our own events. And so we've been blessed over this last year to have been asked to speak at many churches and have made many friends with pastors and folks all across this country. And even prior to this year, we've made friends across the country when we were speaking prior to 2020 when the shutdowns happened.
Absolutely. And so there were a few key things, and many of you that know me and you've listened to the show for some time, you know that I don't like to be cold. And contrary to the perfect weather that everybody thinks San Diego has, I was still wearing jeans and sweaters the last couple of years in June and July.
Yep.
And so that got to be a little...
And our winters were getting colder and rainier and nastier.
Yeah.
So
that wasn't working for Elisa, just weather-wise.
And just as an FYI, I mean, we lived in San Diego for 21 years, so we saw the change in climate.
As we started to travel a lot over this last year, we realized that we do like being close to water, which kind of then starts to really limit certain parts of the country in terms of where we can go. Warm and water. And then we also came to the conclusion earlier this year, Tony really likes sunsets. And to get the sunset along a West Coast really kind of tightens up, again, where you can go. Plus, we were looking at, favorable business climates. We were looking at being close to the one family. And we were looking at the ability to move towards friends and not just move into, just literally throw a dart on the map and just end up somewhere and have to start from scratch. And when we came to Naples in March, many of you know that we had done that. We knew when we got on the plane that we had found the place. And I know some of you are even thinking, okay, guys, you are telling us that you're in Naples, Florida right now, and it is August. And quite honestly, I will tell you that we are looking outside our window right now because Tropical Storm Debbie is bearing down on the west coast of Florida. Yes. We've already had tornado warnings. So it's a whole thing. But I will tell you...
It is a whole thing. It's an interesting welcoming to our new home. And Elisa said something right at the end there. One of the big things for us was moving towards friends, folks that we know, that we can rely on, that we're going to do life with. And so we don't feel alone in this. Some of our friends who are here in Naples have lived here for well over a decade. And so that in itself allows us to have assurance that, hey, this is going on. What do we do? How do we address this? And even coming here, we already found a church. the times that we had come here, we started going to a church. And so that in itself, and some folks in the one family even recommended the church that we had wanted to go to or had already gone to. And so there are these number of different things that just started lining up, and you could just see God's hand and his fingerprint along the way.
And quite honestly, a lot of you know about Abby's college situation. And originally we had planned to move to Florida December, January. We accelerated that since we didn't have to get her situated in school. We're like, we can go now. And so we've just completed this epic 8-state, 2,600-mile, 4-day adventure.
Yes.
From San Diego, California. We spent so much time on Interstate 10. God bless you. And then 75 down here into Naples.
And 8.
Oh, yeah, there were a few.
And a little section of 12, so we
12,
bypass
90.
we bypass New Orleans.
Yeah, a few things, but a couple of the questions that we did get, and we'll start jumping into some of these. What was your favorite state?
My favorite state, I will have to say, everybody was like, "Oh, West Texas, can't believe it." Honestly, I loved West Texas. From that point to like Houston, I thought was absolutely beautiful and wonderful. Other than we did leave one of our cars.
Let's talk about that little adventure.
In Bernie, where we do have other dear friends who were able to pick that car up yesterday from the Enterprise rental car place where we picked up another car to drive here. But I found West Texas to be really, really interesting and fun. And obviously, as we entered the state of Florida, you see the big sign, welcome to the free state of Florida. And it was just like a weight lifted off. But I do love that area too, with all the Spanish moss and
up in the Panhandle.
Up in the Panhandle was just absolutely gorgeous. So between Texas and Florida were my two favorites.
Yeah, I will say the roads are really good in Florida. We spent a lot of time driving a lot of different roads, and the green. And I think it's just. I agree with you. I think it was the weight coming off. I did like going under the Mobile River.
That was really
in
cool.
Mobile, Alabama.
Yes.
That was a lot of fun. We did run away, literally speed away from crazy thunderstorms in New Mexico. That was part of the adventure where I'm like texting the girls in the other car going, see that storm to the left? We are trying to get away from it because if that comes, we are literally pulling off to the side of the road and letting that just go over us, because there are just certain things that you learn about. And we did have a lot of stressors. Right.
Well, somebody even asked, why was the car left in Texas?
Well, that's what I was going to start talking about, the stressors.
Oh, yeah.
Because our 6 pillars, some of them did get really tested.
Did they
on this trip.
Yeah.
So why was that car left in Texas halfway?
So we had some sort of humming noise coming from the left rear. My buddy thinks it's the ball bearings. Not too sure what's going on with that. So that was one stressor.
So just outside of Tucson.
Yes.
Day one, just outside of Tucson.
Yeah, it tripped a sensor. The girls were driving it. We're not too sure what it was. It went off. Elise and I jumped in that car, started driving it. There's that humming sound. And then I start noticing the temperature gauge. And I'm like,
that seems a little toasty.
I think it's moving. And I couldn't recall. And then it was. So it was starting to top out around 250. And the car has mileage on it. I mean, it has like 127,000, pretty much stayed its entire life in San Diego, city driving, nothing in the open road. So it was pushing 150 and a little bit above at times.
250.
250, I mean,
250.
sorry.
150 would have been a dream.
150 would have been amazing. So it's starting to hit 250 and above. And then at one point, as we're starting about 2-3 hours, maybe outside of Bernie, that San Antonio area, the AC is starting to cycle on and off. So there were numbers of issues with that car that were leading to a lot of stress, and Elise and I having to come up with different solutions. What are we doing? How are we doing this? And fortunately for us, Elisa was like, wait, we have friends right there off the I-10, and just started texting and connecting and making plans so that way we could milk it into there and leave it there where it is still to this day. And once our friends have a chance to look at it, get it possibly to a repair shop so we can get some sort of estimate, then we'll decide what to do next with that vehicle.
I just realized as we were telling this story is that these friends who currently have our car, they were in the initial small group that we led when we did our 60 Day of Sex Challenge. These guys have been with us
for years,
like literally since the very beginning.
Yeah.
And when you're in these places where you're super stressed, when you're in these places where you're thinking finances, because we did not expect to rent a car halfway through our trip. We didn't expect to leave a car and have to rent a car halfway through a trip. Because we were under so much stress, Tony and I were really not eating very much the first couple of days. We didn't listen to anything. It was like either we were talking to one another or it was silent in the car because we were so sensitive to all the noises the car was making.
Yep.
And so like, here you are, you're just like lots of emotional intimacy and how are we solving this? And what is this looking like? And, how are we, and you got to keep in mind, we're also moving cross country. So it's not just the stress of this vehicle. It's also the stress of leaving a home that where you've been for 20 years, San Diego, and moving to a brand new place, making sure the two girls in the other car are like, there was so much stress.
Yeah. And someone had asked, how did it impact your 6 pillars? And I think one of the big ones for me is our financial intimacy.
100%.
Moves are big, as many of you know, buying a home, renting something, moving across country, moving, long distances, even in your own state. The cost, it just keeps going. And, that's been a big stressor for me because I'm just like, oh my gosh, the moving truck comes in, the cost of what we thought it was going to be doubled. And then, we have now this whole car situation and the car's still in Texas. And what are we doing with the car? And so for me, that was a big one. Our sexual intimacy pretty much plummeted for.
Well, it just came to a complete standstill.
It did. I mean, we ended up having sex, I think, a few nights before we left, and then the moving truck came, so we didn't have our bed. We were sleeping on an inflatable air mattress for 3 nights or something, and then we were in a hotel for 4 nights with the girls. We had 2 queen beds, so the girls are in there. You finally arrive, and there's still things going on, and so that took a bit of a plummet there for a good week and a half.
But our spiritual intimacy, because when you're praying for a car to make it as many miles as you can, wow, their spiritual intimacy had really just kind of skyrocketed up there. But it's looking at all of those different things. And it's, we all go through stressful things. It's what you do and how you look at your 6 pillars in those moments that makes all the difference. I'm going to discuss that after this break. Whether you're taking care of your kids, a senior loved one, or juggling both, we all need a break sometimes. Care.com can help give you that break by helping you find trusted caregivers right in your neighborhood. As we've gotten older, this is something that Tony and I talk about. When our kids were little, having a trusted sitter was like gold. As the kids have gotten older, so have our parents, and their needs are different. Yet we still want help that's trusted because asking for help isn't something to feel guilty about. You can give more to the ones you love when you get help where you need it. See why 29 million families have turned to Care.com. Find background-checked, highly rated sitters, nannies, and senior caregivers who can help with everything from watching kids after school to meal prep for seniors. You call the shots and find what's right for you, whether it's full-time, part-time, or even occasional help, all on one simple platform. On Care.com, you can search for caregivers, view rates, and find care that fits your budget and schedule. How convenient is that? Check out Care.com to get the support and the break you need.
Time to play Best Fins, a match game with a zest. Among millions of players, can you become the best? No need to invest. Your free download awaits. With 9,000 levels, you'll be quite impressed. No Wi-Fi needed, just be our guest. At Best Fins, you'll be gaming at your best. Download Best Fins for free now. No need to wait. Wait? That doesn't rhyme. Never mind. Download Best Fins, it's great. Available in App Store and Google Play.
We're back, and we're talking about handling highly stressful situations like a cross-country move. And, I think one of the things that really struck me, even in reflection, like when we got into our house, we were able to sit down at the counter and go, okay, we're here. Yeah. We're here. We made it. We're all in one piece, is the fact that we made a lot of space for conversations.
Yes.
And tried to keep the problem and not the other person the problem. I mean, very specifically, I remember when we were driving into Las Cruces that first night, and Tony's trying to evaluate all the car stuff, and he's wanting to talk to me about it, and I want to be there for him, but guys, I know squat about cars. Like, give me a car, tell me what kind of gas I need to put in it, and like just make sure the indicators pop up so I know when to take it for an oil change. Like, I'm not interested in cars. All of you that are, thank God for you. I am so grateful, because I was able to look at Tony and say, I actually think that you need to call a couple of the guys that we know and talk to them, like talk through this with them. Because I knew he needed a man and he didn't need his wife in those moments. And as passenger princess, which I got labeled by the two girls in the other car, I'm like making all the arrangements, right? And so I'm like, hey, why don't you call this guy? Why don't you call this guy? Because it's recognizing when you're in high stress, who do you need to talk to?
Yeah.
Who do you know? What do you need right now? And being able to even ask for help.
One thing I do want to say about that, Elisa was a passenger princess for most of the drive, except for probably like 2-3 hours each morning on the second, third, and fourth day, because we were getting up early and the girls were like, we want to sleep. Cool. So that was totally okay. But I ended up driving the entire way.
Did.
And it was one of the most coolest experiences I've had since doing the Pacific Crest Trail.
100%.
And I was awake the entire time, and truly.
So was I.
And Elisa did, and Elisa did too. But I think one of the cool things about that was when we finally got rid of the BMW in Texas and got into a rental car that we knew wasn't going to break down on us, or possibly break down on us. That's where I think the stress sort of just started to alleviate, and we were able to just listen to some podcasts that many of you in the One Family suggested, which was great. And then we got to just start talking about the future again.
Yes.
And so there was this switch that ended up happening. And I will say, for an adventure like this, the conversations we had in the beginning were different than what we had as we were coming in. And it was such an interesting time to reflect too on what we were leaving and what we were coming into. And the drive allowed us to do that. It was part of the journey. And I think in our marriages, we're part of that journey. But are we driving the car, or are we just sort of haphazardly just sort of going along? And I think sometimes we're at the wheel, but we're sleeping. Not literally at the wheel, but in our marriage, we're just sort of sleeping along the way. And one of the things I just realized for myself is like, there's a new adventure ahead, and I need to stay attentive to that. And maybe even in my marriage, I need to stay attentive to that a little bit more too, when I feel like I could just doze off for a while and not do anything.
Yeah, I definitely think there was a different, I mean, I'm generally the one who, like, if Tony's driving after, 4 or 5 hours, I can easily doze off. And it actually wasn't until the very last day, probably 2 hours from getting here, where I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm so tired, which I actually think was just the culmination of all the stress. But we were so engaged with one another in all of these situations, in making decisions and going, okay, who do we know? Where can we reach out? Like, what's this going to look like? I've got girlfriends that are texting me going, hey, how's it going? Kind of on the download there. Like, how's Tony doing? How are the kids? This type of thing. But I think the other thing too, is that when you are in stressful situations and recognizing that you're going through a journey, is not trying to expedite the journey. One of the conversations that Tony and I had along the way is that the fact that it did take us the 4 days, the fact that we saw so much of the United States. And I never thought I would say this out loud. I would recommend a cross-country drive just to see what the country has to offer and experience it all. It changed us fundamentally, because we got to see so many different terrains. We got to experience so many things. But as we were going through that, like, West Texas is beautiful, you guys. I will tell you, it's desolate as all get out. You are not going to see a lot of people, but they do have some really nice rest stops. But in that space, like, that was really kind of a wilderness for us, because that was when we didn't know what the car, and so like that matched what was going on, and we had to stay attentive, and we had to stay engaged, and we had to be in this place. But then we got into, San Antonio. We actually saw friends from San Diego. They met us at Buc-ee's. We are now officially, we have Buc-ee's t-shirts. We're all official. had a fun experience there at Buc-ee's. And then we, like, as things started to ramp up, driving through Louisiana and Mississippi and Alabama and doing these things, like we were progressing in our own marriage. And that's a transformation that you can't get sometimes if you're just like, oh, I just want the quick fix or the easy out or the 3-hour solution. It was going through that journey. We also had to be in this place, and this happened in stressful situations. What's the immediate problem? Mm-hmm. We're constantly going, what do we need to fix right now? Mm-hmm. Whether it was, we have to pay attention to the car and we have to solve the car thing. Whether it was, okay, because we didn't make any hotel reservations until day of. So I was constantly like on my phone going, okay, where do I think we're going to end up? What does this hotel look like? That kind of thing. But like, what's the immediate problem? Because there were a lot of problems.
Yeah.
But they weren't all emergencies.
Correct. Not every issue is an emergency. And I think learning that and understanding it. And here's the one thing too. Sometimes we can get into this place of, well, we need to be exactly on the same page. And I remember there were a couple of times when I just said, Elisa, tell me where to drive. Tell me what city you want to, or town you want to get to. Tell me what hotel you want to get to. Make the decision and let's go. Because I'm driving and I can't see the maps at this point in time. I can't be on my phone and drive. I can't be researching and determine. What do you think is best? Like, look, tell me, like, okay, well, we could stop here, but if we could get another hour, we can end up here. And we ended up staying at Hampton Inns. Really liked them.
Shout out to the Hampton Inns.
It just for this trip, it just really worked. I like my Marriotts, but Hilton's seemed to have worked out better on I-10 for us.
Yeah, the Hamptons. Yeah,
and so, there came this point for myself was just like hearing and processing with her, but at the end of the day, it was like, let's make a decision and let's go. Mm-hmm. And I think, again, when we look at our marriages, sometimes we both need to feel like we've come to this agreement and we're fully 100% in for us to move forward. And I think I was like 70%, and I'm just like, cool.
Book it,
put it in the GPS, and let's go. Mm-hmm. And we're going to get there, and we're going to you know what I mean? And so sometimes in our marriage, we got to just go, hey, I'm 70% there. I'm going to trust you. Mm. Like, I got it. Like, you want to go another extra hour? I'd rather not, but I hear what you're saying and I understand it. And so book it, and I'm going to get there with you.
Absolutely.
And so I think that was something we did learn, and we had to process and work through as well. Like, hey, just one of us needs to make the decision. Mm-hmm. And, even with like just going for food at times, it was just sort of like, Elisa would just say, just pick something. Okay, cool. I'm picking here. Let's go.
Yeah.
Some places we picked weren't great, so we had to go, had to get back in the car.
Choice number 2.
Whatever it may be. So, and with that, I want to say, we were in Crawley, Louisiana.
Oh,
and this is one of those situations. I picked a DQ. We're going to go to a DQ.
Dairy Queen, for those of you that don't know.
Yep, Dairy Queen. Bathrooms weren't working. Girls were like, nope, not working. So we all got back in the cars. We rolled across underneath the highway, went to a Starbucks. We're sitting in a Starbucks in Crawley, Louisiana. It's like a population of like 11,000. Mm-hmm. We're all wearing our Buc-ee T-shirts. This woman and her daughter, oh my gosh, I love your T-shirts. And we just sort of talk. And Natalie is her name, goes, you guys are podcasters, right? And no kidding, we met someone from the one family as we're driving. And it just struck me how wonderful God is, mm-hmm. and how beautiful. Just going like, hey guys, you thought you were going somewhere else. I'm putting you over here
for a reason.
Mm-hmm. And that's happening in your marriage too. But you got to open up your eyes. You got to listen. You got to see, because there are things that are happening around you that God is going, I got you. Mm. And I'm going to make sure of it, that you have the extraordinary marriage you desire.
100%. That was such a God moment, because if the bathrooms had been working at Dairy Queen, we wouldn't have ended up there. We would have never had that interaction, and that was just such a gift. And it's one of those things too, when you're in those highly stressful situations, don't look at trying to address every single one of the 6 pillars of intimacy, because you're not going to be able to. Like, we had to make, and we had the conversations on, okay, which pillars are just going to drop for this week and this travel time. And that's going to be something you have to do. Like we said, the sexual intimacy pillar, it's off the table until we get to Florida. And we just know it. Financial intimacy, we have to have all those conversations. Emotional, we're doing. And so it's stepping into that place where we were focused on the areas that we needed to be focused on. And we knew that we would come back to and pick up again the other pillars that we intentionally, and please hear that we intentionally put on pause because of circumstances. We didn't just let them drop off. We had the conversations so that we knew that we were in alignment. And that's such a gift for the two of you.
Yeah. A lot of this move will come up in upcoming episodes. It just was transformational in many ways. And, as we stand here right now in our new home in Naples, Florida, there are going to be changes that happen, and we're ready for them. And with it, we're going to share it with you guys, because we believe that every step of the way, new adventures that come, new moves, new transitions in life, adding children leaving, whatever it may be, it's a journey that we're on together. And we want to make sure that as we go through things like this, that we share it with you, so you can take it, use it in your life, so that you can have the extraordinary marriage you desire and strengthen your 6 pillars of intimacy. You guys have yourselves a fantastic week. We can't wait to share more with you and meet many, many more of you as we travel through Florida and the East Coast. Love you guys.